I wrote this book for people who want to learn to build and run a business and hopefully not make the same mistakes I made and the traps I fell into by me providing a framework of principles that people can read about, use as a foundation, and build upon it in order to enhance their businesses. And the biggest struggle for me was really learning all these aspects, and becoming adept at actually putting them in a holistic model that helps you grow and build a business.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper Podcast. I am your host, Michael Palmer, and today's show is going to be a fantastic one. Our guest is a business transformation expert who is the former CTO of Eriksson, president of BlackBerry Technology Solutions, and author of Your Company is Your Castle, Proven Methods for Building a Resilient Business. Sandeep Chennakeshu, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much for having me on your show.
Oh, it's our honor and our pleasure. It's fantastic to have you. And before we get into it, let's hear a little bit about your career journey leading up to this point.
Well, when I think back, my journey started a very long time ago. I was very fortunate to have wonderful parents who encouraged me to do anything I wanted. And my first love was mathematics. And I pursued it, and I got a PhD in electrical engineering. And after a few years, I realized that what I was researching was wonderful, but I didn't know how to build the products I was researching. So I volunteered at the first opportunity to go and build products and got into product engineering. And that led me slowly up the path to become a general manager. And I started running businesses. A few years later, again, my passion changed. And after I was successful at running businesses, I tried my hand at going and fixing broken businesses. And that was a completely new challenge. And I basically was, fortunately, through a number of trial and error situations, successful. And that led me again to change my focus and said, okay, now that I can run businesses and fix them, why don't I start my own company and become a consultant? And that allowed me an outside-in view of companies. And that was a lovely experience because I got to fix different problems across the world that were very different from what I had traditionally encountered in a variety of businesses. And then I got back into the startup world because I was essentially working in large companies, and I wanted to basically go and work with startups, and that is what I'm doing today. And I've essentially spent the last 34 years in the wireless business, in the semiconductor business, and in the embedded software business. And it's been a very enriching experience working across 14 countries across the world.
It's a remarkable career, and also just not only the breadth of your career, but also the depth. And now you're working with startups, and you say embedded software. What is embedded software?
So, of course, that is it's just a distinction, but normally embedded software is software that works very closely with the hardware. Like if you have a chip and you have processors in the chip, then the software that runs on the chip to make it functional is what I call embedded software.
Interesting.
So it could be like software that works on a chip to enable the infotainment in your car, or a driving function in your car, or it could be the software that runs to make your cell phone work, or the software that makes a medical device like a pacemaker work, etc.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And so this journey that you've been on, I'm curious to hear, and always love hearing from our guests, the big obstacles that you faced along your career journey, looking back, the ones that stand out for you.
Yeah, when I go back, I was first appointed a general manager when I was fairly young, probably ill-equipped to handle the job. I think I got promoted because I was technically considered to be astute. I don't know whether I was, but somebody thought I was. And I got promoted because of my technical and operational knowledge. But I had no clue of business. I didn't know exactly how business models worked, how to really read the three statements, cash flow, balance sheet, income statement. I basically did not know how to raise money. I didn't really know how to build a strategy. I knew how to deliver products, and I didn't know about building sales channels. So I was generally not equipped. And I was put into this job. So I made a ton of mistakes. But slowly I learned every stumbling block became a stepping stone for success, because it was actually a progression through this school of hard knocks. And I learned. And that actually is what encouraged me to write this book. I wrote this book for people who want to learn to build and run a business, and hopefully not make the same mistakes I made and the traps I fell into, by me providing a framework of principles that people can read about, use as a foundation, and build upon it in order to enhance their businesses. And the biggest struggle for me was really learning all these aspects, and becoming adept at actually putting them in a holistic model that helps you grow and build a business.
We'll get back to the interview right after this word from our sponsor. Do you have clients using outdated and inefficient manufacturing software? If so, it's not fun. It slows down production, holds up orders, and worst of all, it can mess up the all-important numbers. Katana is here to help. With real-time data syncing for production, inventory, and accounting data, manufacturers get complete visibility over every inch of their business, and their numbers stay up to date even as orders come in. Katana also offers integrations with QuickBooks Online and Xero, which is helpful for your clients and you, their bookkeeper. Katana is excited to be offering an exclusive deal to all the successful bookkeepers out there. If you sign up for their partner program and refer clients before April 30th, they will get 30% off the first 3 months of their Katana subscription. You'll also earn a 20% revenue share for every client you invite. Head to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com/Katana to learn more. Thank you for hearing from our sponsor. Now let's get back to the interview. I can only imagine the book being an incredible resource based on your experiences. And before the show, you talked about writing a book that is more actionable and not theoretical, but actually something that someone can pick up and implement into their business. So I'm excited about reading it. Now, you also mentioned this transition from, like, you've worked with really large organizations and now you're working with smaller organizations. How has that transition been for you?
A lot of the principles about building and running a business are the same, right? There's a lot of structure that you need when you run a complex business. And it could be complex in a big company or in a small company. But the biggest challenge is, in a big company, you have a lot of resources. So in the companies I ran, we had a lot of revenue. We had an established base. We had customers. And we had a significant talent base upon which we can rely on to solve problems. In a startup, nothing is really established. you're actually building a product from scratch. It hasn't really been fully accepted into the market. You're trying to build a customer base, and you don't have as much money, and you must make every dollar count, right? And you have a limited set of talent because you don't have as much money. And so you have to basically wear multiple hats, and you have to basically be far more resourceful than if you are in a big company. And it doesn't matter which level you are in the startup, right? But you've got to basically get your hands dirty and be extremely resourceful in solving different problems. A typical day for me goes about spending time about revenue and contracts, and then I would switch to actually into engineering reviews. And then later I would switch into writing documents that are necessary. Like, I'm in the automotive business, and the automotive business has very strict standards and certifications. And so we have to do a lot of documentation and traceability of what we do. And then a little later, I'd be basically negotiating with vendors. A little later, I'd be working with people who are setting up the manufacturing line. A little later, I get a call from a customer about all the problems we have. I'd have to go back and go try to solve them. And, this, you constantly multiplex, and you have to context switch consistently and continuously throughout the day. And you have to do that efficiently. That's the transition that one learns when you actually work in a startup.
It's sounding very familiar to myself, and I'm sure to our listener. How have you been able to make those transitions and stay efficient and product and keep your productivity high?
Yeah. So first, I'm a fairly structured person. Anyone who works with me knows that the two things that will come across is I'm fairly disciplined and structured. So I compartmentalize my day, from with very clear and a disciplined approach. So I never let anything run away. I try to keep my meetings to a limited time, and I try to focus them on actionable items, not long, drawn, endless discussions. Each meeting is got a fixed time. It's got a problem to solve, and we take actions, and we assign it there and then to people and who should go about solving it. And I keep a list of all of these things so I can follow up. By essentially doing that and making sure that you are organized and not distracted, you can actually get very efficient. The other thing I use is a number of diagnostic metrics about my business. These are metrics that I call thermostats. They're not thermometers. The thermometer tells you what the temperature is, but a thermostat reacts to a situation. So these diagnostic metrics constantly tell me, hey, something may be going wrong, and therefore I need to proactively go and address it. Michael, I always say that all managers must possess 3 traits. I write this in my book. I call it truffles, triage, and temperature. Truffles, why truffles? Because, just like hogs can smell truffles 3 feet underground, managers need to be able to sniff out problems well in advance before they hit you. And that's an acquired trait. You should ask enough questions to know something's not on track, and then address it before it hits you, because then there's chaos. The second thing is triage. Once you diagnose there's a problem, by asking more questions, you can pinpoint what is the root cause and go after that, rather than just assigning hundreds of tasks to people. That becomes inefficient. You go after the things that are most likely and then try to resolve it. Okay, and that is a trait that a good manager should have. And just not throw it over the fence, right? And the third thing is, when you have identified the problem and you know how to solve it through your team, you have to manage the temperature of the team. The team is always under pressure. They're aging. That's the worst time to panic them. you have to be able to manage that very calmly and take the problem on yourself, but help and guide them through the solution. So if you're able to pull all this together, and the things that I just talked about, you can get fairly efficient. And I found that it works really well for me.
It sounds that way, and it sounds quite effective, even just from adding the discipline to the day, where this is what you're going to do. You have specific outcomes you want to achieve, and then as well, your solution for a meeting. Why are we meeting? Specific time that ends on time, and then actually solving the problem and actions right in that meeting. I mean, that is, in my experience, throughout different organizations and throughout my career, meetings can be really, really effective, and the majority of them are not. And if we take personal responsibility for that and bring it with what you're suggesting, how can we not improve our productivity?
Yeah, the other thing is, what I make sure is I don't rely too much on email and chats and things like that for serious issues. If a customer calls me with a problem, I first try to understand what is the problem. And I try to do that truffle triage step even before I bring it to my team. That way, we can give them more clearer direction rather than, when people get engulfed with 2-3 hours or 4 hours of email and responding, it just gets messy. So it's better to say, no, let's stop all that. Let's basically get together. Let's try to identify what are we solving and minimize the amount of churn. And that actually helps the team also respond faster.
We'll get back to the interview right after this word from our sponsor. Do you ever feel overwhelmed with your bookkeeping business? Are there just too many things swirling around in your head without a way to organize them all? Introducing Pure Workflow. It's a simple, easy-to-use workflow practice management solution which will help you manage your clients, deadlines, workflow, and team with ease. Forget about all the struggling to keep everything organized. With Pure Workflow, you can focus on what's really important, your clients. Its client management software gives you one central place to manage all of your client relationships and communications. Plus, Pure Workflow has a flexible reporting ability that will allow you to manage your team and monitor productivity and business results. It offers everything you need to hit your deadlines, manage your to-dos, and stay in control. Unlike other workflow softwares in the bookkeeping industry, Pure Workflow is built exclusively for bookkeeping firms and comes complete with all the templates, training, and documentation for best practice bookkeeping, so you can run your business like a world-class firm. So get your precious time back, reduce overwhelm, and get organized with Pure Workflow. Check out pureworkflow.com for more information. That's pureworkflow.com. Thank you for hearing from our sponsor. Now let's get back to the interview. It's a good point as well. And so with you, when you have this problem, I guess the question I would have is, when do you know when it's time to actually pick up the phone or meet with somebody versus using the email? We have all these tools of productivity, but often we go to the path of least resistance, which is email.
Yeah, but email can, there's two problems with the email, right? You get lots of them. And sometimes you can't explain the problem clearly. And sometimes things get lost in translation. I believe to a large extent in management, one of my bosses, Katsumi Ihara, he was the CEO at Sony Eriksson. I was the CTO. He taught me a phrase in Japanese, and I hope I'm pronouncing it properly. It's called Genba Genbitsu. And he said that go see for yourself. Don't rely on all these translations. So as far as possible, when there's a problem, I try to go and see for myself, and I try to get an understanding myself. What is the issue? Right? That allows me to bring the right people into the meeting or to solve the problem, rather than having, people who don't need to be there. And then assigning it to people and finding out if they can solve it or we need to bring somebody else in. And that can only happen with a face-to-face dialogue. So as far as possible, I try to meet people or talk to them to basically make sure that things can be solved. And I also basically set fairly short schedules for solving it, rather so that we don't forget it, and follow up, right? Because if you have like 5 pages of action items, and every time you meet people, you review them, nothing's going to happen, right? So it's better to basically keep short lists and knock them off.
I love this. I absolutely love this. So see for yourself, and then really getting to the core and minimizing. There's a million things we could do. What are 3 things?
Exactly.
And so keeping it very, very tight. It's just always this dichotomy. I think of there's so many things we can do. There's so many problems we can solve, and even with email, there's so many messages we could send. But if we take the time and spend the time, like you're suggesting, to really break it down to what is the true problem, what is going to be the fix, and then let's take the actions with that, it really does simplify things.
Yeah, and there's another interesting technique. A management consultant taught me this, and it's a really good technique. And when sometimes, whether it's a customer or an employee or from a department, they come and they complain to you about something is wrong. And I always tell them, guys, if you want to complain, sure, I have an empathetic, sympathetic ear, and you can complain. But I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that complaint. Can you transform that complaint into a request? Like if you're overworked and tired, sure, I can give you a few days off. That's a request I can grant. But I don't know what I should do if it's just a complaint. And I always tell people who have complaints, like, can you be part of the solution? Because then you're vested in the solution, and there's a higher likelihood that you'll accept the solution. So I try to get involvement and, distill complaints from actions, because unless there's a request, it's very difficult for you to take any action.
So true. And I find that with problems, right? There's people say we have a problem, which is kind of like a complaint. There are actually more complaints now thinking about it. And so once you have that frame over top of it, well, what is the request? We can do something about it.
Yeah, and the last thing is, I believe in very high honesty with my customers. Many a time the customer will give me a list of things to do, and I can't prioritize all of them. So I'd go back and say, these are the things I can give you by February 28th. The remaining things I'll give you by March 15th and a few more by April 15th. And the customer might say, okay, shuffle a few things, and that's okay. But what I try to tell them is, I'm not going to commit something and always not deliver, right? I'd rather break it up into tranches and say, I'll deliver something to you with a high probability if you will work with me, right? Because I don't want to just be a hero for 15 minutes by sitting with the customer and saying, I'll solve all your problems, and then completely fail. It's better to basically make sure that you deliver what you commit, and that helps the customer and it helps your own team, so that they're not all working on everything and failing on everything.
Love this. I absolutely love that one. And I think it really applies to our listener, because they have a lot of deadlines all the time. They never end. They have to prepare the inner workings to get to those reports you talked about earlier: cash flow, balance sheet, income statement. It's always needed. And sometimes there's inputs coming in that they have control of, that don't have control of, and they're constantly having to manage expectations of customers. And so by saying, yes, it's going to get done, every time they have an opportunity to look really bad if they're constantly saying it will be done. So spending more time on, here's what will get done by then, and just commit to what you can do versus feeling bad about it and trying to be the hero. Because I think part of it is they do want to be the hero. They won't only say it, but they'll want to be, I need to get this done. But there's probably circumstances that haven't enabled them. So I think that one piece there can lead to more satisfaction on their part, being able to sleep at night, knowing that, they haven't overcommitted, and also on the side of the customer.
Yeah, and part of that is also, I call one chapter in my book, I called it Building the Triangle of Trust. And the triangle is these three pieces in the triangle, three vertices are your investors, your customers, and your employees. And I'll talk about customers only. I like to engage my customers and establish a relationship of reliability. And when they believe I'm reliable and I'm honest with them, they're willing to help me more. So when they give me ambiguous requirements and say, do it, if I got a good relationship with them, I can say, please break it down. Can you give me better requirements? Can we do this in phases? And you can't surprise them just before the deadline. You have to do this planning well in advance. And once you do that, then all of the previous things I said are easier. But it's super important to stay engaged with the customer, meet with them regularly, give them updates, tell them where you are, so they're never surprised, right? If you surprise them, then that's when they're upset, right? So negative surprises are not good. Positive surprises are always good.
So true. So true. Let's talk a little bit about the ups and downs of business. You've seen probably too many to list. And certainly there's a lot of, at this time of this recording, there's a lot of uncertainty in the marketplace globally, in North America, all over the world, talk of recession, talk of all sorts of stuff. And also another stat around the success or failure of businesses, that it's stated that about 2/3 of all companies fail in the first 10 years. What are your thoughts around this? It's a two-part question.
Yeah. So, first of all, the statistic, it's from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, that 20% of all companies fail in 2 years. I think 45 fail in the first 5 years, and 65% fail in 10 years. And there are many reasons. There are studies by many people who looked at businesses, and they say, one, they run out of money. So obviously, financial management or fiscal prudence is lacking. Okay. They design products that the market doesn't really want. So the product relevance to the market was not there. 3, they don't hire the right people to deliver. So there is a talent gap with the ambition gap. 4, they might price the product in a way that without market knowledge. So they believe they can price a product for $700. There are cases where somebody thought there would be a product for $700, $800 when the competition is producing it for $200 or $300, and you just miss the market. And then, of course, there is just the pressure of competition, which evolves every day. So these are the common reasons. There's also another reason for the very high failure in my mind is there's a clash between strategy and culture in the company. Strategy determines what you need to get done. And culture determines what you actually get done. When culture is not aligned with strategy, you never execute the strategy. So it's important that culture is aligned with the strategy. So these are the common reasons. And so part of all of these things, and it's a very big topic, it actually is the crux of why I wrote the book. I think a lot of companies which have these failure statistics are started by clever people with clever ideas, and brilliant people, actually. And what happens is they don't invest enough in building a business systematically, addressing all the components that reinforce each other to build a strong company. And as a result, one portion of the company is weak, and that becomes the point where the disintegration begins. And this is why I call the book also Your Company is Your Castle. Because medieval castles that have lasted 500 years have certain elements that protect the castle. Not only from nature's elements, which in a business are macroeconomic factors, depressions, recessions, pandemics, etc., But the castle is also protected from enemy projectiles and arrows. And similarly, your has to be protected from competitors. So the whole book is actually focused on exactly addressing this question. Because I posed this question very early in my book. How do you make your company to last? What are the things you need to do? What are the structural things you need to do systematically to ensure that every aspect of your company is shored up and can withstand these attacks?
Just remarkable. Love the analogy. And just thinking about it, similar analogy is that many people are building a castle with walls only on one side. It's like
exactly.
Awesome over here, but terrible over there, and it will not be able to succeed.
Exactly. For example, if you have a perimeter wall or the curtain wall around the castle, if it was not reinforced at its foundation to be broader and strong, it's not going to be able to withstand a trebuchet that hits it. And if the wall was too long and you didn't have protective towers to guard the wall, well, people could either scale the wall or tunnel under it, and you would still be breached. So there are all these things similarly in a company one has to pay attention to.
And it is interesting. I mean, from a smaller business perspective, you mentioned wearing lots of hats, and obviously the owner. Let's talk about one owner starts a company, and they're wearing a bunch of hats, and they're kind of good at all the hats. But as the company grows, they can't be doing all the hats as well, likely, because they have to bring other people on. What's been your experience, or what have you seen how can an owner transition when they've maybe got a really strong wall, say in the sales and the marketing, but then on the service and success side, client success side, they're weak. And then they have to bring in team members. Like if you get the hiring wrong on that, I guess that comes back to the strategy and the culture. But it is a pivot from, and many of our listeners are solo business owners, and they hire staff, and it's a big challenge to go from being someone who's doing all of it, and it's working great, to all of a sudden now you've got to have other people doing these things.
Yeah, I think there are two principles I have used in order to build teams. And one is, very small from actually small teams to bigger teams. The first is to find people that are complementary, right? Who can shore up all of the holes that you need to fill. And that's important because for that, you have to be fairly honest with yourself and say, you got to be true to yourself and say, what is it that I really don't know and can do well? What can I entrust somebody who has more skill in that area? Okay, now when you hire these people, it's important that you try to find out what they do know. In many interviews, people try to find out what people don't know. That is worthless. You need to find out what they do know, and do what they know. Can it fill the hole that you are looking for? Ask them for concrete reasons how they have solved similar problems, and see if that makes sense. Check their attitude and resourcefulness, and do they have a sense of urgency? And will they be a team player? The last thing you want is someone super bright who can fill a hole that refuses to cooperate, right? So I think it's very, very important that once you identify your holes, how you interview these people, ask them to demonstrate to you how they would solve problems. And I normally actually lay out the problem that I have to the person being interviewed and say, okay, how would you solve it? Give me some examples how you have solved it. And let's see if that makes sense. Convince me that you're the right person for this role. And then also basically talk to them and find out generally how do they work with others, and I feel attitude is very important. When you hire someone, competence is important, but attitude is probably more important.
Some remarkable gold that you've given us today on this short conversation, and I feel like we could just want you to have you for a couple of days, maybe a week, maybe a couple of months. We can keep talking, but I really am excited about reading your book. Tell us a little bit more about the book before we let you go. Where, if we have, I mean, we've talked a lot about it, but if there's anything else you'd like to add, and as well, where can our listener get out there and get that book?
Yeah, so the book is available in hardcover on Amazon, and it's also available on Kindle. Of course, in some countries, the hardcover is not available because Amazon does not provide hardcover in every country, but it's available in on Kindle, which you can download the app, which is free, of course, and you can probably read it on iPads and Kindles and other electronic devices, your PCs, desktops, etc. But the book is, the book, as I said, is a practical book. It systematically walks through the various aspects of building a business, which is necessary to build a successful business and make it last. So there are structural elements and there are checklists and recipes that I provide, and not just anecdotal case studies, but actually practical things that I have done with stories and examples. So people have the context about why I'm proposing these bulleted lists of things that people can try and do and to see the results. And every chapter reinforces another chapter, and you will see as you read through the book. And once you come in, so it talks about how to build your business model. How do you basically improve cash flow in your business? What are the things that you can do to do that? How do you create a strategy and products that are relevant to the market? How do you define such products? How do you deliver such products on time with the right quality, with the right specifications, and at the right cost? How do you build sales channels? How do you manage the sales channels? How do you close contracts? And how do you handle marketing and make an efficient business? And then I talk about execution. How do you make sure that everything runs like clockwork and you can deliver with some simple principles? How do you give performance appraisals to employees? And then I talk about how do you work with investors? How do you work with customers? How do you work with employees? How do you bring awareness? How do you keep them engaged? And finally, after you've built this whole castle, I talk about some leadership attributes that you should probably think about because you need to build yourself to run such a castle. And I forgot there's an entire chapter on culture. How do you build a productive culture to align with the strategy? So that's the synopsis of the entire book. And it's filled with examples from not only my 34 years across various countries in the world and some very groundbreaking products, but also examples from different industries and a variety of industries, not just the tech industry, that have influenced my thinking, and also books that have influenced my thinking. So that's pretty much what I've written about. And my hope is that it'll really help a lot of entrepreneurs, business owners, mid-level managers, CEOs, and students to start building grander castles on the foundation that I have laid.
It's so exciting, listening to you and your background. It's rare that someone can sit next to and get advice from someone like yourself, that the journeys that you've been on, the things that you've seen, the lessons you've learned. I mean, you've given like 3 or 4 like key learnings from different areas of your business that took you 34 years to gain, and here we are getting them in 35, 40 minutes. And now you've got a book. The book really sounds like one of those books that I can unpack all of your experience and learn from it and hopefully apply it to my own business in a fraction of the time that it took you to go and gain all of that wisdom. So I'm excited. Our listener works with business owners all over the world. And I really think that this might be a book that'll help them, but also be an amazing resource and potential gift that our listener can give to the business owners that they're working with, because they're the ones that see those failures, coming and happen. And often they're helpless to do more than the key things that they need to do, which is to ensure that there's clarity and certainty in the financial workings of their business. But being able to say, look, here, read this book and do better on this other side of your castle can really make a massive difference to some of the clients that they're working with. So this has been fantastic.
Yeah, and it took me 3 years to write, and I was helped with fantastic mentors, and I dedicated the book both to my wife, who's been very inspirational in my life for 33 years, and also to all the people I worked with. I could not have written this book without their contributions. Any success I've had is because of them. I've always maintained that failures are mine, but my successes have been failures because I made some decisions that were bad, and I made lots of them. But the successes are because I've had fantastic employees, and they've taught me much, and they've generated the successes that I've enjoyed too. So it's been a fabulous journey. I'm 65 today, and it's such a rich experience, that I can reflect on every day and reflect upon each memory and enjoy what I've had the privilege of doing this far.
Well said. And now it's a gift to us, to our listeners and the future readers of your book. Well, thank you, Sandeep. This has been absolutely a pleasure and honor to have you on our show. And I want to thank you for your generosity on behalf of our listener, for you coming on and sharing your wisdom with us today.
Thank you, Michael. It's been my privilege. And if I can be of any help, please reach out. Thank you again.
Well, thank you. And with that, we wrap another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. To learn more about today's wonderful guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.